Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the David Guttman podcast, CryoCon 2025 edition. Got a really exciting guest here, Griff Long. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to, like we talked a little bit before we went on camera, I want to just dive into a little bit about some of the stuff in the health, wellness, and biohacking space. I know you're relatively new to the space with Upgrade Labs, but not in terms of health and wellness. Obviously, that you've been doing for a long time. But more importantly, you've obviously, run pretty big, pretty large size teams, and want to dig into some of that because a lot of the audience, they're looking for both tips on how to be healthy and fit, but also on how to be successful entrepreneurs. You're president of Upgrade Labs, but you were the COO Orange Theory, Pure Barre, SVP at SoulCycle, and VP of Ops at Equinox. You hit every blue chip brand I could think of pretty much.
I've been pretty lucky. I actually spent 14 years in the transportation industry with Hertz. Worked with a company called FlexCar that became Zipcar. But my passion...
I didn't know Zipcar wasn't the original name. I did not know that.
Well, no, it was always Zipcar, but we merged, FlexCar merged with Zipcar.
Oh, okay.
There were two competing entities. But something was missing for me. I started my athletic career at a young age. I was a downhill ski racer, and I wanted to get back into health and wellness. So I got into triathlons. I still remember to this day, I went to a triathlon certification. I got to know what the coaches know. I always want to know more. And when I did this, I remember sitting in the hotel room, drinking tea at 2 a.m, just talking about human performance. And I went back and I said, how do I get surrounded by folks like this that are passionate about this? Because I want to make a difference in people's lives. So I wrote a letter to Scott Rosen, the president of Equinox, and I said, I got a lot of leadership skills. I haven't been in the health and wellness industry, but I think my skills are transferable. And they took a risk on me, and that's how it started.
And so, yeah, that's quite a pivot. So how do you still do triathlons now?
I do. I'm on my 4th knee surgery and using a lot of the CryoCon recovery tools to help me go. Probably the best thing I've learned through this journey is the recovery side. We were talking earlier, but it's like you push your body so much. But when we were growing up, it wasn't about recovery. It's about just hitting it hard every day. So I have to balance
recovery, sleep.
Yeah,
that was the extent of it.
That's right. So I've really focused on recovery. So doing less races. I did one last year, but I'm doing it because I love it. And, I love the competition, but it's much more what I would say, planning, doing run race. I love the training more than the racing. The training, the training's love. But when you have to go to race day, there's so much logistics, carrying your bike, shipping your bike, all of that.
Yeah. Now, are you doing mostly Olympic distance races or Ironman or?
Mostly Ironmans, and I started getting into ultra running too.
Wow. Okay. So that's really hard on your body. It's funny. I've gone the other way. So like I said, I was a very mediocre Division I college wrestler. And I was a pretty competitive age grouper triathlete for about 5 years after college. And one of the things I was talking about in one of the earlier podcasts I did today, that, of course, this, they write the age on your calf. So every person that you pass and every person that passes you, how old they are. And what always I was pretty fast. I would run, in an Olympic distance race, I'd run the 10K at the end of the triathlon at a 36-minute, so 5:45 per mile pace, something like that. And every race I ever did would be some guy in his 70s that would blow by me like I was standing still. I'm like, how is that even possible that they could be that fast? And they started like 5 age groups behind me.
Yeah. Yep. When they pass you, it's demotivating, but also motivating at the same time, knowing that when you get that age, you can do that. And the first thing I'm thinking about when you said you're running the under 6-minute mile, I'm like, well, what's your Olympic distance time? I'm that competitive. I'm like, cool, can I beat you?
Right. Well, now for sure you could, because I haven't done a triathlon in years. I did. I actually attempted an Ironman triathlon. God, this would have been in 1983. Okay. There were only 2 Ironman triathlons in the world at the time: Cape Cod, Rhode Island, and Hawaii. Those are the only 2. And I think you legally had to be 18. So I think I lied about my age to even enter.
Yeah.
And it was just crazy. So, funny story. So I have an older brother, And he was coming as my trainer, so he could get a free trip to Cape Cod with his girlfriend, and he brought a girl for me. So listen, I didn't get much sleep the night before the race. On top of that, there was a storm, so the water had turned over. So the water's like 58 degrees.
I've been there.
No wetsuits back then.
Yeah.
Okay. And they didn't cancel the swim, but they were just kind of like advising you, like, maybe you don't want to race, but they didn't cancel the race.
Yeah.
And because the water turned over, Japanese man-of-war jellyfish everywhere.
Oh.
So the only thing that was helpful was, so again, the waves were at like 5-foot swells, and I'm swimming in the ocean. I've done zero ocean training, right? I get clobbered by a wave, maybe like 200 meters into the race. My goggles are gone, and I wear contacts. I can't ride my bike without. So I swam side stroke for 2.5 hours. So when I finished dead last out of the water, right? They put me in a tent, I had hypothermia, and I'd be getting stung by the jellyfish because I couldn't tell because I was completely numb. I couldn't feel anything. The fact that I didn't drop dead is a miracle.
Yeah.
That was my first and only Ironman triathlon. I actually got about 40 miles on the bike before I started vomiting and then I threw in the towel.
Yeah, that triathlon and those ultras, it's really, for me, it's, people think there's 3 parts to the event. There's actually 4. The mental part is the one that I'm intrigued by. It's like, how can I push my body and get more out of it? And
Right.
I did my first triathlon. I swam on my back, and the swim in Olympic distance took me, I think, 45 minutes.
Right.
I got that swim down to like 20 minutes, when I got better. And I just progressed to the Ironmans. I did the long distance. I represented on the amateur level on all disciplines for Team USA. And then I got to do Kona. It was probably my last big race, but it's a wild journey and it's a lifestyle. Just like biohacking is a lifestyle.
Well, it's funny because, I'm sure you see this in races all the time where someone's bike costs more than their car. Like, that's common.
Oh, my bike, $22,000. Oh my God. And you keep upgrading, and I still have it. And I was going to trade it in because I wanted a new one. And they're like, oh, well, it depreciates just like a car. I'm like, wait, look at the components on this. We'll give you $1,000. Okay, I'll keep it.
Wow. Yeah. Well, so I've gone the opposite direction just because, all my old wrestling injuries and so forth. So now I'm trying to shrink the amount of time that I exercise as small as possible to, still keep myself fit, keep my VO2 max decent, but try to, because I'm not, trying to train for a race or anything like that. But you're a little bit more slender than me too, so maybe not as much wear and tear. My joints, man, if I were to do that much wear and tear, but I don't know if my body could take it.
Well, it's a struggle for me too. I'm on my 4th knee surgery, so I have 30% cartilage left in my knee. But, what I'm learning more on the recovery side is all of the tools out there that you can use to help with the recovery. That's what we focus on at Upgrade Labs, like the PEMF blanket. When I first put my knee into that, first time I did it, I said, stop, it's hurting. Right. My knee, something's wrong. And like, no, it's attacking the dead cells. I'm like, the next day I got up and I felt like I could run that 6-minute mile again. Wow. But the recovery portion, like you said earlier, is the part we missed. And now I spend a lot more time on the recovery. I spend a lot of time in those HyperX Normatec boots and the Balance Pro boots. Anything I can get my hands on, I want to test it because that's going to help you compete longer. And don't underestimate the power of rest. We don't focus on nutrition. We don't focus on rest. And those are 2 big misses.
So you run Upgrade Labs for Dave Asprey, right?
Correct.
So how did you guys meet and how did you end up in that? I got to believe that wasn't just hey, Griff seems like a good guy. When can you start? I'm guessing there probably was an interview process that went through that.
It was mutual acquaintance, somebody that I used to recruit for the company I was previously a CEO of, reached out and said, Dave Asprey's looking for somebody. And I don't know if I should say this, but I'm like, who's Dave Asprey? I wasn't into the biohacking world. But I met him, and it was the fastest interview I've ever had. I never met Dave in person. We talked for like 2 hours on the phone, and he just appeared to be a genuine human, great human who really cared about people. And I immediately found that to be true. I mean, he was talking about helping me with my knee and helping me with my personal journey. And, going on, I was with him in Dubai, and seeing the people come up to him and say, thank you, you saved my life, you helped me. And I really want to surround myself, as I do in leadership, is with great people that inspire me. And there was no angle. Even when we were negotiating the contract, Dave was like, well, let me put some stipulations in there to protect you. And I was like, wow, can this be real? That's how we met.
It's funny. It, the thing that's so interesting to me is there's so much psychopathy in the C-suite in corporate America. Maybe it's like that in other countries. I don't have a lot of experience there, but it's my experience is so the opposite, because if you do what Dave did, it's like it's so easy to we've all had that boss that actually gave a crap about us that we would basically murder for. And even if you're a self-motivated, driven person and you're still going to do good work, you're not going to kill yourself for that person. The person who just sees you as a cog in the machine versus someone who actually cares. And you can't fake that. At least you can't fake it for very long.
Yeah. I've learned more from bad bosses than I have from the good bosses, meaning what not to do. But there's probably four real leaders that influence my career that I still call and keep in my circle and provide with advice. And I added Dave to that list.
Yeah, well, really, really a fortunate situation. It's funny. I remember my daughter, so I have a 25-year-old daughter, and she feels like a significant part of the reason she's on this planet is to keep me humble. And she takes her job very seriously. I'll add that as well. And so she doesn't give me compliments very often, but I want to say she was maybe 10 or 11. And in a moment of weakness, probably, she's like, Dad, she's like, you're a really good parent. How do you know how to be a good parent? And I'm like, man, I don't want to screw this answer up. When she's 35, she's probably going to parrot this back to me. And I thought about it for about 30 seconds. I said, all right, it's really simple. All the things your parents do that you like, do those. All the things your parents do that you hate, do the opposite.
Yeah.
And being a good boss is kind of the same thing, right? It's like I'm a very spiritual person, not particularly religious. But the golden rule, which is if you just lead and manage people the way you would want to be led and managed, that's 90% of it.
I totally agree. And, when I think about leadership, and I think Simon Sinek says it's not about being in charge. It's about taking care of those people that you're in charge of. And sometimes you lead from the front, sometimes you lead from the back. But the most important thing is check that ego at the door. And I know exactly when I recognize that I had an ego. And, as you get more wisdom and older, become more humble. And I focus a lot of my energy on staying humble. And I take all the blame for everything that goes wrong, and I give all the credit for everything that goes right. I don't measure my success by how many people, by how much I make. I measure it by how many people I've influenced. And when you get a letter from an employee 10 years later, her name was Genevieve Juponda, and she says, Griff, I called you to say thank you. I'm like, I haven't talked to you in 10 years. What could I possibly done? And she said, you believed in me. I brought her to 3 different companies with me. She goes, I just got my dream job. I'm now the chief of staff for the Treasurer of California. And you get those letters, and that's the difference. That's my why. I want to make leaders better than they thought they could be. Almost like Ironman, you want to do the impossible, or you don't even know your limits. I want you to test your limits. I want to challenge you to be 1% better than you were yesterday. And that's how I lead my teams.
Well, you're in a very small minority of people that lead and manage that way. It's funny. I got a guy who had. I'm big into mentorship. The thing that I find really interesting, that's surprising to me, is I genuinely believe I get more from the mentorship I provide than that I give. Though I would hope that they find it valuable. I know I find it valuable in ways that, quite frankly, surprise me. Like, I learn from my own mentorship of others, which is counterintuitive, but it absolutely is true. But anyway, so I was, I create a fair amount of content, and a guy had reached out to me on LinkedIn who I didn't even remember that he had worked for me before, maybe 15 years ago. And he basically had mentioned the same kind of thing, like how much my leadership had meant to him and changed the way he thought about how to be a leader and his career trajectory. And I was like, I felt embarrassed. I didn't even remember that he had been on my technical team. And but it really is true that if you people think that if you, as a fiduciary, that you should serve the company first and the individual second, and that's not my experience. My experience is what's best for the company, ironically, is focus on the individual first and the company second. and you'll get a better result for the company.
My principles are people, process, performance. And I've turned down CEO jobs because of that, because our number one goal is to increase shareholder value. So I want you to focus on the numbers. And I said, no, I'm going to focus on the people. I'm going to get the right players on the field. I'm going to give them the right tools to do their job. I'm going to give them the competency and clarity, and then I'm going to empower them to do whatever they want. I have never missed a target. I should say I have almost never missed a target. There were 2 times I missed a target, 9/11 and COVID.
Right.
That's the only time. But I want to surround myself. So I should figure out a positive way to say this, but I want to be the dumbest person in the room when I walk in with my team.
Right.
And I want them to celebrate the success, and I want them to push me. And it's, to me, like we talked about, the best leaders are the ones that are coaching and developing their teams, staying humble. You'll never hear me yell. I'll yell when things are good. I'm very quiet when things are bad.
Yeah, people really underestimate how much panicking actually creates the problem. Like, problems happen all the time. There's no businesses that don't have problems. I remember I joined a company as CEO. It was a Forex prop trading firm, and my very first day, we lost 60% of our customers. That was my first day, and so you can panic, right? Or but if you panic, guaranteed it's going to make it worse,
and it's going to cascade down the organization.
That's right, because people would say, but when you don't panic and you're like, let's think this through. Let's talk about what can be done. Because at the end of the day, all you can do is control the variables that you have some control over, and the rest of it you've got to let go of.
Yep. And I think, I always talk to the team, we're either winning or learning. That's it. So people come in and say, oh my gosh, this happened. I'm like, great. What did we learn from it? What are we going to do? How are we going to fix it?
The Jocko Willink, extreme ownership.
Who?
Jocko.
Oh, Jocko. Yeah.
Yeah. Where he basically, if something bad happens, he's like, good.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yes. And, funny story is I think as leaders, we have to grow and continuously learn. And I'm on a quest. With all my teams, always here 1% better every day. And a quick story. I remember when I came back, I worked for Hertz Rent-A-Car, which taught me a lot about leadership. But they sent me to a 3-day event where I was going to be a CEO of this fictitious company. It was the most intense 3 days. I had an office. They were all actors, but they were psychologists. So I had an inbox I had to manage. I had meeting with salespeople. So we went through the whole thing, most painful but rewarding experience. And they said, well, Griff, one of the things we discovered is you need to empower and trust your team. And I'm like, what? Empower and trust my team? When my team comes to me, I give them the answer.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, I'm not empowering them. So I went back, and I'm very transparent. I show every one of my reviews. I do 360 reviews of my team, and I show it to my team. And I said, listen, I'm going to empower you all more. So you're going to see a little shift. So I remember Alish Faida, who's also followed me to 3 different companies. She comes up and we have a problem. This is when we were doing the car sharing thing. She goes, Griff, we got a problem. And I said, okay, rather than immediately solve it, which is non-power, I said, what do you want to do? She yells at me, what the hell? Can I just have the old Griff back? Give me the answer. I'm like, no, this is new. So here's what happened over time. So the next time she came back, she goes, we got a problem. Here's what I'm thinking to do. And what do you think? And it continued to escalate. Griff, we have a problem. Here's 3 alternatives. Which one do you recommend? Then the final step, Griff, we have a problem. I looked at these 3. I implemented this. It's all set. And I tell you, that allowed me to focus more on the bigger strategic things just by empowering, trusting the team, and being a teacher lifelong.
Yeah, it really is surprising how uncommon, the statement you made earlier, that it's exactly what I do too, which is deflect as much credit as humanly possible and absorb as much blame as humanly possible. Your team will thank you for it.
Yep.
And the reality is you're not getting it done without them anyway. And it's true that even if some of it or a lot of it are your ideas, they're the ones that are executing it. So They deserve a lot of the credit. And if something goes wrong, it is ultimately your responsibility. So it is your fault.
And it takes away that victim mentality.
Right.
So if I have to fire somebody, that's my fault.
Right.
Either I hired them or I couldn't. What could I have done differently? I always come from a place of curiosity, which is the second thing I teach my team. Because if I walk up to you and say, I have a great idea, and you say, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. I'm not going to bring the idea to you again. But if you come from a place of curiosity and say, that's an interesting idea. Have you thought about this? And you come from a question mode rather than a judgment mode, that's going to bring the team coming back, keeping good information, because there are a million ideas out there from your employees. They're just waiting for you to ask. And that's where we find a lot of our success.
It's funny. I was saying before how I learned from the podcast that I've been doing. So I ran this telemedicine company, a chief operating officer, super smart woman. But she's a little rough around the edges sometimes. So, and I've said this to her face, I said it to her when I had her on the podcast, whenever I bring her an idea, her first reaction 100% of the time is, it was the dumbest idea she's ever heard. How could I be so stupid? But yeah, I'm not, my feathers don't get ruffled. I think it's hilarious. And then I wait 61 seconds, 1 minute and 1 second. And she'd be like, but now that I think about it, if we just did this to this, actually that would really work. That's a good idea. And anyway, so I had her on the podcast and I was asking her about some of her insights and her professional development. And she had mentioned that one of her blind spots, which is something that I'm very cognizant of, is that she was giving the solution too often. And she's like, that's bad for two reasons. One, I don't have the same depth of information that my team has. So they're going to have ideas I won't have just because they're more in the weeds than me. And two, I'm not empowering them, to your point. And so she said that to me. I was running a crypto trade desk at the time, and we were just about to go through a strategic planning process. And just because I'd had that conversation with Maria, I said, you know what we're going to do? There are 11 people on the trade desk. I said, every person is going to put together a 30-minute presentation about their 3-year plan for the trade desk. They're going to present to me and the guy who was president of the trade desk, and then we will synthesize what they told them, and then we will report back to them their ideas reformulated with a little bit of input and sort of structure from us. And you want to talk about everyone being bought into a plan. I'm embarrassed that I didn't do it earlier in my career. I'm like, how did I not do this before?
That is one of the keys to my success, I think. When you have two options. You go into your team meeting and you say, okay, we're going to do these 5 things. You may have those 5 things, but if you hold on to them and say, hey, listen, it's not working. What are the 5 things we need to do? And if you get that as team members to tell them, and you can influence that, if they're missing one, you can lead them, but there's maybe a 6th or a 7th that you didn't think about. But they are so vested because it's their idea. It's the simplest thing to do. Don't go into your meetings and say, we're going to do this. Go into your meeting and say, what should we do to fix this? And you will be amazed at the turnaround you have on that team. You'll bring them to another level.
So where did because one of my personal frustrations throughout my career is I've had a really hard time finding what I call a holistic mentor. I've had some business mentors for some brief periods of time, but their personal lives were a disaster. Their health and fitness was a disaster, their family relationships, things like that. And so I've been frustrated that I didn't have that, though I tried to be that for others. You must have had a mentor, or how did you come to have this sort of style and approach?
Early on, when we started, it was a lot of leadership was leading with fear. And I learned, as I mentioned earlier, through some bad leadership. I never, I'd have a boss yell at me and I was like, I never want to make an employee feel like that. But one of my big mentors, God rest his soul, came into my life was Jack and Susie Welch, Jack Welch. I got the opportunity to work with him on a project he was doing, and I latched onto him. He's the one that got me to go to Equinox. Even after I was doing a project with Hertz when I worked for them. He came in, we filmed a show that he was doing, and I called him and said, hey, I've got this opportunity to do this. And he's still an advisor for Hertz. He goes, chase your passion. And I did. And I get up and I love what I do because we get to see change people's lives. And that's pretty aspirational to me. And it's also a responsibility. So Jack was probably the big influencer. Scott Rosen from Equinox, who one of the best leaders I work for, really cared. And I think it's just people, that that cliche, I guess it's a cliche. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. But there's a lot of it, I'm a big Simon Sinek fan, but I continue to learn. I spend an hour every morning. I won't take calls. I'll turn my phone off. And I just listen to podcasts, leadership books. I think it's Headspace, but I go in there and read the short versions of the books. And I try and pick up one leadership tip every day. And I share that with my team. But I think it's just being on a quest to, one, stay humble and challenge yourself to be 1% better every day. So keep learning and learn from those mistakes. I used to get mad and yell. I remember getting bad news on a phone call or having a customer yell at me, ripping the phone off the wall, throwing it out. And, but you're like, and then the team's like, are you okay? And I'm like, I don't want to show that because that's weakness.
Right.
And then I never want to yell at somebody because if I'm yelling, that's not solving anything. And then I have to apologize. But I think staying humble, staying curious, and putting the team first in continuous learning is what's impacted me.
So you had Jack Welch as a mentor. My God, talk about winning the lottery.
He was an unbelievable human being. And the show he did, he was all business, but I walked in and I'm from New England, so I'm a big Patriots fan. And I said, so what do you think about the Patriots? The first thing he says, well, I had dinner with Belichick the other night. And I'm like, oh. But it's, I sat there and listened, and I come prepared with good questions because that's where you find out who people are. He invited me down to his house and helped me make some other decisions. But yeah, I was really fortunate. And those good mentors, like Scott Rosen, like Jack Welch, Scott Sider from Hertz, those are the folks that helped shape my career.
So it's interesting to me because it sounds like you have had some really good bosses, some bad ones too. So I'm curious why you made the career pivots you did. I feel like I'm interviewing you like for a job or something, which is crazy. But I was just really more just curious. So like at Equinox, sounds like you had a terrific boss. You said he's one of the best leaders. How come you left there? And was it just the opportunity was?
This is how Scott Rosen had impact on me. It's like, this was, 10 years ago. Griff, I'm not going anywhere. You're probably going to need to go to reach the next level. He knew I wanted to be a CEO someday. So he goes, you might have to go outside. He gave me good advice.
Wow.
And that is like, he's sacrificing the company because he cared to me. So he gave me to SoulCycle. It's because Equinox owns SoulCycle, but who does that?
Yeah, wow.
And that's the way I operate. I have an employee that worked for me, I think 4 different companies, and her name's Aloysa, and she was remarkable. She's Forbes 30 under 30, getting her PhD, and she got laid off from Orange Theory, and I hired her as a contractor, and she said, can I come on full time? And I said, no. And she said, why? Because your contracting business. She turned it into a $200,000 business during COVID. She went out and did other things. But you got to, I can't remember what it was saying, but good bosses will let you leave. Great bosses know you're going to leave. And I wanted her to learn like I did through other people. So now we're business partners on a couple of deals. We own a couple of franchises together. But I think that's the coolest thing that Scott did for me, is he let me go.
Man, I got to tell you, I'm envious. Way better bosses than I.
Well, I could tell you some horror stories too.
We'll compare horror stories another time.
Yeah.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about what Upgrade Labs is doing. I know you've only been there, I think you said 8 or 9 months.
Correct.
Let's talk a little bit about what they're doing. It's at least been a little bit, I know from my conversation with Dave and some research I did, it sounds like some pretty cool stuff, but I'd love the audience to hear more about it.
Yeah, well, we're completely 100% franchised. I should say 99%. Dave and I have purchased one together. But we have 8 open. We're opening a night soon. We have 20 sold. We just sold a license overseas. I can't tell you where it is yet because I'm superstitious. It hasn't been inked yet.
Right.
But we have a roadmap to 400 locations in less than 5 years.
Wow.
And I think what's going to be unique about what is unique about what we're doing is we're building the super app. So anybody can clone and upgrade labs. Just go out and buy the equipment that you see at CryoCon, and you could make shift. What is the unfair advantage? Our unfair advantage, and I'll tell everybody they can go out and do this, they just need $15-20 million, is taking the technology and the data from the technology, from the wearables, from our Axo Health, where we do lab testing, bring that all in, and we're using recommendations. We're using AI to say, what did you do yesterday? Based on that, we're going to give you recommendations. So you went out and ran 7 miles? We are going to see your sleep score. We're going to see your training readiness score. We know your history. We know your blood work. We're going to give you custom recommendations to what to do next. It may be in an upgrade labs. It may not be. But I think it's our secret sauce is going to be that app that we're building. And we've got some really cool teams working on that. For right now, it's just building more infrastructure to support this massive growth we have. Really exciting. The recovery part, it's, I think we said it, we want you to be able to do it on your terms. If you're an endurance athlete, or like we do, we call maybe weekend warriors, you might just want to do the recovery. Here's a solution for it. Your FOGO, have you heard of FOGO yet?
No.
Fear of getting old?
Okay. I haven't thought of that.
So if you're FOGO, we have solutions for that. You don't like to go to the gym. You've never been to the gym, but you're getting old and you're starting to worry about that. Okay. We have programs customized for you. We're using all kinds of data and everything to customize that program in talking to you to make sure we meet you where you are. If you don't like cardio, don't do cardio. We'll put you on an AI bike where you got to do 2 30-second intervals, and that will help with your VO2 max. We want to keep people moving. We're using videos to do motion capture so we can see your flexibility. And if I can get a hit your flexibility on your hips and your left hip is tight, I'm going to put you in the PIMP blanket for 15 minutes, put you back and do that assessment again. You'll see immediate difference. So we want to measure results. As you and I know from business and from our sports, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So we're measuring everything we're doing.
Wow. And so people would buy basically like a membership like they would to a gym effectively?
Yeah, we're doing sort of a credit model. So you can come in, most of our services are less than 20 minutes. We recommend 2 or 3 a day, but you can do as many. You can hang out there all day. But you come in, you buy a membership based on your needs. You get credits. You come in, you schedule your appointments back to back. Maybe you want to do cryo, then you want to do the PIMP. And maybe you want to get some strength training with our AI machine. You can do that, but it's all customized for you. Come in on your terms.
Got it. Do you have any locations in Florida, in Miami?
Ooh, nothing in Miami.
Miami would be perfect for that.
We're actually talking to a group in Miami. We have one opening in Orlando and Tampa.
Okay.
In probably 3 weeks.
Okay. Oh, interesting. I'll have to check one of those out. Well, so what would you say is you've done a lot of different things. What would you say is the single best piece of business advice you've ever been given?
I have to use my rule of 3. Can I give you 3?
Give me 3. Can you give me 3?
So Damon John from Shark Tank,
yeah.
Just had dinner with him and Dave. Dave introduced me. He's looks like he may be joining our board.
Oh, that's cool.
I asked him the same question, and it's something advice I give. So trust your gut. That's one thing. And every time I haven't trusted my gut with a higher decision, I always regret it. So trust your instincts. The second thing is stay curious. Make sure you're always coming from a place of curiosity, even when it's bad news, even when you've made a mistake. And third thing for me is extreme ownership. Take all the blame and give all the credit.
Yeah, the thing I think people miss about the extreme ownership, one, I feel like, and it's I think the pendulum's swinging a little bit back the other way, but there's such a victim mentality in Western culture. It's so pervasive. It almost feels like it's rewarded sometimes.
Yep.
And the part about it that I think that's so insidious is, besides the obvious stuff, is like when you make it your fault, now you have agency. You can actually do something about it. If it was someone else's fault, you're not going to change somebody else.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing, less empowering than making it someone else's fault.
Yep. What's the first thing you got to do when you're in a hole to get out? First thing you got to do is stop digging. Right?
I like that.
And what I tell my team, if we have a team member in a hole, I don't want you to jump down in the hole and start complaining and become a victim with them. Your job is to throw a life preserver in that hole and then fill that hole up with water and pull them out. Right. So I think it's that victim mentality is probably the one thing I see more and more. And, I will call people out. Yeah. Don't be a victim. Own this. What are you going to do differently? Let's get away from that.
When you're thinking about people that you're going to, potentially bring onto your team, what are the qualities you most look for?
Coachability, humility, and curiosity.
Those are three great. It's funny. Of the people I've asked that question, you might be the only one that's ever used humility in that list. And to me, it's one of the top ones, because if you don't have humility, you stop taking in new information.
Exactly right.
Underestimate that.
And I have, some of those bad bosses, I have seen some huge egos, and that's how I discovered I had an ego. And it's like when you do that, you stop learning, you stop growing. So I want to make sure that you're coachable, and I would rather hire somebody with less experience and put them over their head than hire somebody that's got 20 years experience with a big ego that is, could make me go faster, because they're going to step on anybody in their way to get what they want.
Yeah. I people complain about, the younger generation. I got to tell you, I've gotten some incredibly talented, incredibly hardworking and disciplined people. I was running this prop trading firm, and I brought this he was 24 at the time, year old kid to come in, really just do some Discord stuff. And within 4 months, he was running my entire marketing team. And I remember him telling me that his aspiration was eventually to be a chief marketing officer. And I remember, I feel foolish saying this now, but, saying something like, yeah, I could see 8 to 10 years in the future. He's that now. He's 26, I think. And really what it came down to was, I'll tell you, I will take the right attitude over the right skill set any day and twice on Sunday.
I've read some stats a while ago. The number one reason people leave their jobs, it's not money. It's lack of growth. Number 2 is their boss. And number 3 is money.
Right.
And I can count my direct reports on 2 hands. It's 8 over the course of my career that have left. 6 of them left because they got big promotions. I couldn't afford to keep them on. Right. The other 2 were fallouts. But right. when you create that culture and they're continuously learning and they feel rewarded, they will stay with you. And sometimes you have to push them out like Scott did to me.
Yeah. Well, listen, this has been a super, super great conversation. Where can people find you, find Upgrade Labs, and find out more about what you guys are doing?
Yeah, it's upgradelabs.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Griff Long. I'm the only Griff Long on there, so it's easy to find. I love to make connections. I do coach people for nothing, whether it be triathlon, running, or mentorship. I love to help people, so I'm always looking to make more connections.
Oh, that's great, Griff. A real pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.